They poured a $500 bottle of wine on a stranger to humiliate him. He didn't know that stranger was an undercover billionaire who had just bought his family's debt. By the time the wine hit the floor, the waiter had already decided to bankrupt him. If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, Lucas and I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. You don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The men's restroom at the Obsidian Hotel smelled of lavender and expensive cologne, a scent that usually comforted Lucas Bennett, but tonight he was doing something that made his stomach turn. Standing in the far stall, Lucas carefully folded his $3,000 Italian blazer and placed it into a duffel bag. In its place, he pulled on a jacket he'd bought at a thrift store 3 hours ago. It was polyester, 2 sizes too big, and smelled faintly of mothballs and stale cigarettes. Lucas looked at himself in the mirror. The billionaire CEO of Bennett Enterprises was gone. In his place stood a tired, worn-out man who looked like he'd been beaten down by life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crinkled photo of a 6-year-old girl with pigtails. Lily. "For you, baby girl," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "No more gold diggers, no more lies. Tonight we find someone real." He needed a mother for Lily, not a stepmom for his bank account. Meanwhile, in the grand ballroom just outside, the atmosphere was suffocating for entirely different reasons. Amara stood near the champagne tower, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed the silk of her emerald gown. She was breathtaking, a stunning woman with an hourglass figure that drew eyes from every corner of the room, but she felt less like a guest and more like livestock at an auction. "Stand up straight, Amara," her mother hissed in her ear, pinching her arm. "Julian is watching. Smile. If he doesn't announce the engagement tonight, your father goes to prison for that debt. Do you understand?" Amara forced a smile, though her chest felt heavy. She looked across the room at Julian, a handsome man with cruel eyes, holding a wineglass like a weapon. She was trapped in a world of diamonds and debt, longing for a way out. She didn't know that the exit was about to walk through the door wearing a moth-eaten suit. Have you ever felt judged or treated poorly just because of how you were dressed or what you had? Let me know your story in the comments. Lucas stepped into the Obsidian ballroom, and the air immediately felt thinner. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and shimmering sequined gowns, swirling under the light of massive crystal chandeliers. In his oversized polyester jacket, Lucas stood out like a bruise on flawless skin. He grabbed a tray of empty glasses from a passing table, blending in as a member of the waitstaff. It was the perfect camouflage. He moved through the crowd, his eyes scanning faces, looking for kindness, but finding only vanity. Then he felt a hard shoulder check. Lucas stumbled back, barely keeping his balance. He looked up to see Julian, Amara's fiancé, towering over him. Julian was holding a glass of 1982 Chateau Margaux, his lip curled in a sneer that didn't reach his cold eyes. "You bumped into me," Julian said, his voice loud enough to cut through the ambient chatter. The nearby conversations died instantly. A circle of silence expanded outward from them. "I apologize, sir. I didn't see you." "Clearly," Julian drawled. He looked Lucas up and down, inspecting the frayed cuffs of his jacket. "You know this suit costs more than your life, and now you've dusted it with your poverty." Before Lucas could respond, Julian tipped his wrist. It wasn't a splash, it was a slow, deliberate pour. The dark red wine cascaded over Lucas's head, dripping down his forehead, soaking into the collar of his cheap shirt and staining the polyester a deep, violent purple. It felt ice-cold against his skin, running down his neck like blood. Lucas didn't flinch. He didn't wipe it away. He just stood there, the wine dripping from his nose, and looked Julian dead in the eye. A few people gasped. Then another giggled. Soon a ripple of cruel laughter moved through the elite crowd.
To them, this wasn't assault, it was entertainment. Lucas's heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took not to snap his fingers and have security throw Julian into the street. This is the test, he reminded himself, thinking of Lily. Let them show you who they are. Across the circle, Amara's hand flew to her mouth. She didn't laugh. Her eyes widened in horror, her breath hitching in her throat as she watched the man stand there, dripping with humiliation, yet possessing a strange, quiet dignity that terrified her.
The laughter in the ballroom was a jagged sound, sharp and ugly. Julian smirked, turning to the crowd as if taking a bow. "Someone get a mop," he scoffed, gesturing vaguely at Lucas, "and I don't mean for the floor." Lucas felt the sticky liquid seeping into his shirt. He prepared to walk away, to accept the role of the defeated nobody. He had seen enough. The test was a failure. These people were rotten to the core. But then, the sound of rapid, clicking heels broke through the laughter. A flash of emerald green cut through the circle of black tuxedos. Amara. She didn't look at Julian. She didn't look at her mother, whose eyes were bulging with silent warning. She walked straight to Lucas, her face pale but set in stone. "Stop it," she whispered, her voice trembling but audible in the sudden silence. She grabbed a linen napkin from a nearby table, fine white cloth meant for the elite, and reached up. With shaking hands, she began to dab the wine from Lucas's face. "What are you doing?" Julian's voice dropped, dangerous and low. "Amara, get away from him. You are embarrassing me." Amara froze for a second. The threat hung heavy in the air. Embarrassing him. Not cruelty, not bullying, just embarrassment to his reputation. That selfishness sparked something hot in her chest. "You poured wine on a human being, Julian," she said, not turning around, her eyes locked on Lucas's surprised gaze. "You're the one who should be embarrassed." She wiped a droplet from Lucas's cheek. For the first time, Lucas really looked at her. Up close, he saw the terror behind her eyes. She was terrified of Julian, terrified of the consequences, but she was standing there anyway. "Miss," Lucas murmured, staying in character, though his heart was racing. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. She turned to the gaping crowd. "Excuse us." She took Lucas by the sleeve of his sodden, cheap jacket and pulled him away from the center of the room, leaving Julian standing there, his face twisting from mockery into pure, cold rage. Amara didn't stop walking until they reached a service corridor behind the kitchen. She pushed open the door to a small linen closet, the heavy steel shutting out the roar of the party and the prying eyes of the elite. Suddenly, the world was small, quiet, and intimate. The space smelled of starch and lavender detergent, clean smells, far removed from the stench of wine and arrogance in the ballroom. "Here," Amara breathed, her chest heaving as the adrenaline began to fade. She grabbed a stack of clean white hand towels from a shelf. "Hold still. It's soaking through." She stepped close, too close for strangers. She pressed a towel against Lucas's lapel, her movements frantic and apologetic. Lucas stood frozen. He could smell her perfume now, jasmine and rain, overpowering the sour odor of the wine. "I am so sorry." Her eyes focused intently on the stain on his chest. "He had no right to do that, no right." "You shouldn't have done that, miss," Lucas said, his voice deep and steady. "He's your fiancé, isn't he? You angered him to help a nobody." Amara paused, her palm resting against Lucas's chest. Through the wet fabric, Lucas could feel the warmth of her palm. It burned him, a stark contrast to the cold wine. "You're not a nobody," she said softly, finally looking up at him. Her eyes were a kaleidoscope of hazel and green, swimming with unshed tears. "Those chains, it may be made of gold, but they're still heavy. I don't have the luxury of choice tonight." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Lucas wanted to tell her right then that he could break those chains with a signature, but he bit his tongue. He needed to know if she was truly different. Amara patted the inner lining of his jacket, trying to soak up the last of the moisture. Her hand brushed against something stiff in the breast pocket. "Oh no," she whispered. She reached in and pulled out the photograph Lucas had been looking at earlier. It was soaking wet, The red wine had seeped into the paper, bleeding across the edges. Amara stared at the image of the little girl with pigtails. A single red droplet had stained the corner of the girl's smile. Amara's eyes filled with tears, faster and harder than when she had faced Julian. "I'm so sorry," she choked out, looking up at him with genuine devastation. "Your daughter? We ruined it." Lucas gently took the photo from her hand. He didn't look at the damage. He looked at the love in the image. "It's okay," he said softly, wiping the wine off the glossy paper with his thumb. "This is Lily. She's 6. And you didn't ruin anything. You're the only one who tried to clean it up." "She's beautiful," Amara said, her voice cracking. "You're doing this for her? Working tonight?" Lucas nodded slowly. It wasn't a lie, exactly. He was doing this for her. "I'm trying to find a future for her. A mother who isn't like the people in that ballroom. I need someone real. But maybe that doesn't exist anymore." Amara slumped against the shelves of white linens, looking suddenly fragile. The glamour of her emerald dress seemed to fade, leaving just a tired, scared daughter. "It exists," she whispered. "It just gets bought and sold." She looked down at her engagement ring, a massive diamond that looked like a shackle on her finger. "My father made bad investments, millions in debt. Julian, he holds the loans. This marriage isn't a love story, it's a foreclosure settlement. If I don't walk back out there and smile, my parents lose everything." She looked up at Lucas, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I wish I had your life. I wish I just had a job, a little girl to love, and freedom. You're the richest man in this building, and you don't even know it." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. "If only you knew," he thought. "If only you knew I could write a check to free you right now." But he couldn't do it yet. He needed to know if she would choose him without the check. The fluorescent light of the linen closet hummed overhead, a stark contrast to the crystal chandeliers outside. But to Amara, this cramped room felt like a sanctuary. She dropped the stained towel into a bin, letting out a long, shaky sigh. "It's not coming out," she said, frustration leaking into her voice. "I failed." Lucas reached out, gently catching her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was warm, rough, and reassuring. "You didn't fail," he said, his voice low and rumbling in the small space. "Do you know how rare that is?" Amara looked up at him. For a moment, the debt, the engagement, and the pressure vanished. She wasn't a commodity here. She was just a woman standing in front of a man who looked at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I don't want to go back out there," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I feel safe here, in a closet, with a stranger covered in wine. How pathetic is that?" Lucas smiled, a genuine crooked grin that lit up his eyes. It was the first time she had genuinely smiled in months. "It does," she teased back, a shy blush rising on her cheeks. "It's a look." The air between them shifted. The playfulness settled into something deeper, charged and electric. Lucas didn't let go of her wrist. He took a half step closer. Amara didn't back away. She tilted her head up, her lips parting slightly. "You are worth more than a debt, Amara," he said, his thumb brushing the pulse point of her wrist. "Don't let them make you believe you're just something to be bought. You're priceless." For a heartbeat, time stopped. They leaned in, drawn together by a magnetic force that defied logic. Amara closed her eyes, desperate for just one moment of real connection before she was forced back into her cage. The door to the linen closet flew open with a deafening crash, shattering the moment. Light from the hallway flooded in, harsh and blinding. Julian stood there, flanked by 2 massive security guards, his face twisted into a mask of triumphant malice. "I knew it," Julian sneered, stepping into the small space. "Stealing the silver or just stealing my fiancé's time?" "Julian, stop!" Amara stepped in front of Lucas, her voice shaking. "We were just cleaning." "Quiet," Julian barked. He turned to the guards. "This man stole my platinum Rolex. I felt him lifted when he bumped into me. Search him." "That's a lie," Lucas said, his voice calm but icy. He didn't move as the guards stepped forward. "It doesn't matter what the truth is," Julian whispered, leaning close to Amara, his voice dripping with poison. "Now, here is how this goes. You are going to tell this filth to leave. You are going to humiliate him right now, or I call the police. And after he's in handcuffs, I make the call to foreclose on your father's house tonight." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. The trap had snapped shut. She looked at Lucas. He was watching her, his jaw set, his eyes searching hers. He wasn't afraid of the guards. He was waiting for her choice. "Amara?" Lucas asked softly. She couldn't let him go to jail. She couldn't let her parents end up on the street. She had to break his heart to save his life. Tears streamed down her face as she shoved Lucas's chest hard. "Get out!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Just go! You don't belong here! You're nothing!" The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Lucas stumbled back, the rejection hitting him harder than the wine ever could. He looked at her trembling hands, then at Julian's smug grin. He saw the terror in her eyes. He understood. "I'm going," Lucas said, his voice void of emotion. He picked up his duffel bag. He didn't look back at Amara as he walked past Julian and the guards. Amara collapsed against the shelves, sobbing, as the only man who had ever treated her with respect walked out of her life. Amara had to choose between saving her family and standing up for Lucas. What would you have done in her shoes? Tell me in the comments. The heavy oak doors of the Obsidian Hotel slammed shut behind Lucas, pushing him out into the cold, driving rain. He walked down the steps, the water washing the sticky wine from his hair. He didn't head for the bus stop. He walked around the corner to a blacked-out Rolls-Royce Phantom idling in the shadows. He climbed into the back seat, his expression unreadable. "Sir?" his driver asked, startled by the stained, cheap suit. "Are we going home?" "No," Lucas said, watching the hotel entrance through the tinted glass. "Wait here. The show isn't over." Inside the ballroom, the nightmare was reaching its crescendo. Julian dragged Amara to the center of the dance floor. The band stopped playing. He grabbed a microphone, his grip tight enough to bruise her arm. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian announced, his voice booming, "I'm happy to announce that tonight I have acquired not only a rare vintage wine, but also a rare beauty. Amara and I are officially engaged." Applause rippled through the room, polite, hollow, indifferent. Amara stood frozen. She looked at the faces around her, the people who had laughed at Lucas, the people who saw her as an acquisition, not a person. She thought of Lucas's calm eyes. She thought of his daughter, Lily. She thought of the man who told her she was priceless. "If I stay, I die," she realized. "Maybe not physically, but the part of me that matters will die tonight." Julian leaned in to kiss her, a final seal on the contract. Amara shoved him. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a shove fueled by a lifetime of silence. Julian stumbled back, the microphone screeching feedback. The room gasped. "No," Amara said. Her voice was quiet, but in the stunned silence it carried like a bell. "Excuse me?" Julian hissed, his face flushing red. "I said no," Amara screamed, her voice breaking with raw power. She ripped the diamond ring from her finger and threw it at his feet. It skittered across the marble floor. She turned to her parents, who looked horrified. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, "but I can't breathe." She kicked off her high heels. She didn't care about the whispers. She didn't care about the debt. She turned and ran. She ran past the champagne towers, past the security, and burst through the front doors into the storm, desperate to find the only man who had ever made her feel free. The rain came down in sheets, soaking Amara to the bone within seconds. Her emerald dress was heavy, dragging on the wet pavement, but she didn't stop. She scanned the dark street, her heart pounding. She saw him. Lucas was standing under the awning of the servants' entrance, his back to her, watching the rain. "Lucas!" she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. He turned. His eyes widened as he saw her, barefoot, soaked, shivering, but running toward him like he was the only lifeline in the world. She crashed into him, grabbing the lapels of his wine-stained jacket. "I left him," she gasped, mixing rain with tears. "I left him, Lucas. I don't care if we have nothing. I don't care if we have to struggle. I just want to be where you are." Lucas looked down at her, his expression softening into something agonizingly tender. "You gave up a fortune for a waiter, Amara? You walked away from safety?" "Safety without love is just a prison," she whispered. Before Lucas could answer, the hotel doors banged open. Julian stormed out, his face purple with rage, followed by 3 security guards. "Grab her," Julian shouted, pointing a shaking finger, "and throw that trash into the gutter." The guards lunged forward, but Lucas didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He simply raised one hand. Suddenly, headlights blinded them. 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt at the curb. The doors flew open, and 4 men in earpieces sprinted out, forming a protective wall between Lucas and Julian's guards. The general manager of the Obsidian Hotel, the man Julian had been trying to impress all night, ran out into the rain, holding a large black umbrella. He bypassed Julian completely and held it over Lucas. "Mr. Bennett, I'm so sorry for the disturbance. Shall we remove these guests?" Julian froze. The rain plastered his hair to his skull. Mr. Bennett?" he stammered. "No, that's the way. That's—" Lucas slowly unbuttoned the cheap, stained polyester jacket and shrugged it off, letting it fall into a puddle. Underneath, he wore a crisp white shirt. He stood taller, the air of authority returning instantly. "I'm not a waiter, Julian," Lucas said, his voice calm but striking with the force of a hammer. "I'm Lucas Bennett, owner of Bennett Enterprises, owner of this hotel, and, as of a phone call I made 10 minutes ago, the majority shareholder of the bank that holds your family's debt." Julian's knees actually buckled. He looked from the SUVs to the guards to Lucas. The color drained from his face. He wasn't just ruined, he was erased. "Get him out of my sight," Lucas said dismissively. As security dragged a sputtering Julian away, Lucas turned back to Amara. She was staring at him stunned, her hands hovering over her mouth. You're... "I'm just a single dad looking for someone real," Lucas said softly. He reached out and wiped a raindrop from her cheek, echoing the way she had wiped the wine from his face. "My parents," Amara whispered, fear still lingering. "Are safe," Lucas promised. "I handle the debt now. They're free. You're free." He opened the back door of the Rolls-Royce. Inside, it was warm and dry. "Come on. Lily is waiting up for us. She wants to know if I found her a mom." Amara looked at the luxury car, then at the man holding the door. Not the billionaire, but the man who had looked at her with kindness in a linen closet. She smiled, a radiant, genuine smile that outshone every diamond in the hotel. "Let's go home," she said. She climbed in, and Lucas followed. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing out the cold, the rain, and the cruelty of the world, leaving only love at last. Do you believe money changes people, or does it just reveal who they really are? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching another story of Lucas Bennett to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as wild and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, subscribe. Lucas and I will be waiting for you tomorrow.